I'm Nancy Murphy, and I am from all over Oregon. I've lived from Portland to Ashland on the I-5 corridor and in Bend as well, and I've been back and forth to Eugene a few times, but now I live in Salem. In 1971, I came to the fair with Bill Goodpasture and Carla Goodpasture and a lot of folks from the Filbert Ranch up on in Vida, and had a wonderful time. And then I came back in '72 as a crafter. I was engaged in all kinds of wonderful conversations about right livelihood and earning our livings from with our hearts and our hands, and providing the things that we needed for each other. And I had been sewing and making quilts all my life, and I was about to drop out of college, and I thought, I have a next thing to do. So I came to Eugene and I joined a dressmakers co-op and came to the fair with them, and the rest is history. Well, in the early days, the kind of community values were really a powerful part of the fair. And I remember a really pivotal point for me. My father was a public servant. My mother was a teacher who had her own school. So I was kind of born to be a teacher, bred to be a teacher or a public servant anyway. But there was a year when the Free Souls, it must have been '72, but I'm not absolutely sure, when the Free Souls crashed the fair, and the Lane County Sheriffs followed them to the fair. And I was standing at Jerry Rust's right hand because I was raised in a scouting family, among other things. And when the alarm went up, I showed up to help for some reason. 110 pounds of me with the Free Souls. But I stood at the right hand of Jerry Rust, and one of his big Hodad friends was on the other side of him. And I was there when he talked the Free Souls into doing the right thing for the good of the order, for the better good of the larger community, and was extremely impressed with the value of good communications in doing public problem solving. And that kind of reinforced my interest in public service. I didn't go to that career at that time, but that stayed with me. And the Cynthia and Mike Wooten sort of ethic of right livelihood, and we could do economic development in a different way, which I think was an important theme early on. So I did it with the quilts. I made quilts. I picked a recession that hit Oregon very hard in 1971 to try to start a luxury business. I always did functional quilts, but they couldn't be cheap quilts, you know, they had to be nice. And I did go to Marin County, California for a number of years and had a cooperative retail store there that I was a founding member of that kept me going for a while, and then came back to Oregon to have my family. So I've missed 2 fairs out of 47, if my math is correct. And one of my children was conceived here. When the bank fell off here on Abbey Road, they pushed our camp back into the woods. So now we can point to a spot in the road where he was conceived. And my other son was almost born here. I managed to hold on to him for a couple more weeks after the fair, but we are really deeply tied to this fair. The first year my younger son was verbal. We came up, we were coming around this corner, and he just took off. And I said, "Paul, where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going home. There's our home." I met the boy's father here, and I was still in Marin, and he was out in Dexter, close to Eugene. And we started a family in 1979, and the boys are both very creative. They're musicians, and they have both created jobs for themselves in sound. When they were in preschool, I went back to school and got degrees in energy management, environmental management, and regional planning, and started a career in land use planning in county government, so lots of resource issues in county government at the age of 40 in 1990. But the fair is the one constant in my life. I've been up and down the coast quite a bit. Actually, I've been up and down the coast between San Francisco and Berkeley and Portland for the last long years. It's hard to do the math anymore, 48 years. But I came back to start the family, and that made it a lot easier to get here. It was just me and the kids for a number of years in the late 90s and in the 90s. So I still love my craft. I can't work as fast as I used to, but I still like to put on a show. In the early years, a lot of us were pretty serious idealists, if you can understand that. Serious about changing the world, about making the world a better place in the 70s. But there were always the monkeys in the temple. There was a lot of psychedelic use in those early years, and I think it created kind of a spiritual bubble in a way, people seeing the world in new ways. It wasn't extremely conducive to business, but the fair wasn't just about business, obviously. I think there's been a conflict between those sort of root values of the origin of the fair and the right to party any way you feel like partying. And there still is that conflict of values. It just manifests a little differently. There was a period in the 80s when we became a destination party site for young men who were willing to carry coolers full of beer around the fair all day long, and then maybe dump their coolers in the recycling area somewhere. If you're lucky, they're in the garbage area. And the no alcohol rule was huge for the craft community and for the families at the fair, because it got so it was not a relaxing place at all for a little while there. But the same kind of tensions are still here. It's just kind of the dominant focus shifts a little bit. Now we've got people wandering around. This is in the Be Here Now capital of Oregon. We've got people walking around with their faces on their smartphones while they're at the fair, which is just completely counterintuitive to me. It makes no sense at all. And the vendors could probably take credit cards more consistently if the public would just put their phones in their pocket and realize this is not an electronic experience out here. It's much more tactile and intimate than that, and it should be. But, you know, I had a hard time getting in this year. Every 4 to 6 years, I have a hard time getting in. Something stupid happens that throws me off, and you have to learn pretty early on philosophically. You get past that, and then it's the fair, and that, you know, that's great. But this year I was very grumpy when I got here last night because the lines were very, very slow, and I got sent through one line I didn't really need to go through, and I missed the gate to get my car in here by 5 minutes, and I was furious because I'd been standing in line for over 2 hours. But c'est la vie, you go out, you park the car where they tell you can park the car, you carry in what you can. Thank goodness my stepdaughter got things set up and had my tent and my bed already here, so that was a treat. This is the first time we've done that, but that was huge for me. I don't know, I would have been a very bad start otherwise. But it's the idea of tossing up city government in a period of a couple of weeks and having it work for all the thousands and thousands of people who come here. It's really pretty amazing. Turnover on staffs, the years you get glitches is when there are big staff turnovers, and I know now with my generation stepping out of a lot of those responsible positions, there's a lot of turnover because the folks with the origin story are retiring. I wish we did a better job of conveying our origin story. I wish people understood why all the parts are here and what each of us does for everyone else. I think there's a kind of a chronic concern about not being appreciated on every crew. But, you know, if you were in government, as I have been for the last 30 years, you'd understand that being appreciated in an open way is really not necessary. The value of the work is doing it well and taking care of people's needs. What is my vision for the future of the fair? My vision for my booth is that my stepdaughter will get screened in as an artist, and so we can have a tidy handoff and stay in our camp that I've been in for most of the time I've been here. I think over 40 years in the spot. For the whole fair, just like the outside world, we're not very good at communicating with each other, and we do make quite a few missteps in terms of compassion, I think, and that is counter to our founding ideas I can't articulate it this early in the morning. I haven't had a real cup of coffee yet, but I hope it persists. I hope it goes on, and I hope better communication skills would be good, but there's so many people. It's just kind of, who else can put together 30,000 anarchists together and make sense out of it? I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. So just keep trying to make sense out of it and keep learning new ways to talk to each other. And in addition to our origin stories, we should be listening to ideas for change. But I think change that makes it more urban or more electronic or more edgy, I think this should be a break from that. This should be a break from those things that are so distracting out in the world. My last part of my career, I dealt with identifying highway routes that would serve us to survive a major Cascadia subduction zone earthquake and tsunami. So, that's a tough kind of decision making. But you have to figure out how to articulate the problem and the needs and sift through the chaff to come up with the kind of the seed of something that will work and your best methods. I spent the last 3 years working on the statewide transportation safety action plan. There were a few stakeholders who weren't included in that process, not because we didn't think they were important, but that we knew they wouldn't play fair. We knew they would put their own interests ahead of everyone else's, of all the other stakeholders, and we didn't have time to play that. That's a real important thing to understand when you're an idealist. Knowing you're right is not persuasive. Knowing what you believe and what you know and listening to what everyone else believes and what everyone else knows is critical. No one is always right, and no one has all the answers. So I guess my point is that you need to be able to step back from your idealism a little bit. Don't let go of it. Don't ever let go of it, but definitely think globally, participate locally. So to be effective in the world, you need to be at the table. And to be at the table, you need to be able to temper your idealism to the extent that you hear what other people say, and you know that everyone else, even if they seem stupid, they're probably not, because there are a lot of kinds of intelligence, and everyone should have a voice, and if we're not listening, we're not effective. But keep doing the fair, keep trying. It's a huge experiment, so far fairly successful. Hopefully it just gets better. I mean, I am sentimental about some things. And the work I did in planning, I'm kind of attached to. I just retired on the 1st of June this year. And I left a job I didn't like very much, but it was work that I really liked a lot, and it was hard. It wasn't easy. We don't have the solutions to social problems, the solutions to governance issues like we often have at the country fair are not simple. And I don't know what else I want to say. I love the kids at the fair. I'm a great child watcher. I have my first grandchild who's going to be here as a sentient being for the first time this year. She's 14 months old, and her dad is going to be doing a lot of running to keep up with her. I love the kids. I made children's clothes for a lot of years when my boys were little. Now that I have grandkids and I have more time, I'm going to start making kids' clothes again, so that'll be fun. One of my booth partners is a toy maker, and so having children's things, that will change the mood at the booth. That's one thing that's changed over time is what I focused on. And I'm looking forward to that, as long as the craft committee is comfortable with me coming back with them after having just a token number for a few years. And then we have leather boots. I love sharing my booth with other crafters. I was very fortunate that I have kind of a big booth, and it gives me my chance to make these wonderful friends over all of these years. I mean, there are probably at least 20 people who've spent more than a couple of years in the booth. And usually when they start with me, they stay as long as they can. And I love that about the fair, that we are a community of makers, and that we're raising our kids with these same basic values. And I guess that's what I love most about the fair in general over all these years.